Okay. Those of you who are tuning in at 1, just fast forward a little bit. We're just started a couple minutes early to make sure everything's a go, technically speaking. This is going to be Q Talk. Oops. And I am covering for her today. I'm Melody MacDuffie, and I'll reintroduce myself in a couple minutes. So just hang in there. We're sort of checking all the different broadcast venues to make sure everything's up and running. All right, we're good to go. I'm going to give it till 1 for those who are tuning in right at 1. This is my first time to do Q Talk. I'm very excited to be here. And I'll just blab a little bit. I'm going to be demonstrating my wire by the row. I don't know whether to call it a technique or just an approach to making jewelry, but it's very versatile. I have a lot of fun with it, and I'm going to share the basic elements of that with you all today. And I'll let you know when we're technically going ahead. Okay, so we've got Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch all broadcasting. Andy, do you know whether it's broadcasting on my Facebook or just Q's? I'm a guinea pig today. She's been trying to figure out how to do this. Okay. Okay, she wasn't sure if it was going to work. She did a test and it worked that way, but she said it very well might not, so she's still grappling with that one. All right. Okay, I'll give it just another 30 seconds or so. Well, hello everybody. This is Melody MacDuffie. I'm covering for Q today. It's the 69th week of Q Talk, and I'm here with Andy, my producer, who is going to let me know if my hands wander off screen or if we have questions from you all. He'll relay the questions to me. So we're simulcasting on actually 3 channels. It looks like the 4th one, my Facebook one, isn't working yet. I was Q's guinea pig for that, and she hasn't quite figured out how to make that happen, but she's working on it. But we are on Twitch and YouTube and on Q Talk on Q's Facebook. A little bit about me. I am a jewelry artist, wire jewelry artist. I specialize in wire. I have several full-size books out. They are out of print now because the publisher has gone under, but you can still find them on Amazon.com, and if you Google me, they'll pop up all over the place. I also have several booklets, and I'm going to show you a couple of those later because they show you some patterns that you can do with the technique that we're going to be talking about today. I've done a craftsy video. I've taught a lot online, especially since the pandemic started, but I am starting to get back on the road now and teach face-to-face. I have taught in, it's either 43 or 44 states around the country, and I've taught in Morocco and West Africa. West Africa led to the founding by me and a young man that I met when I was there of a small fair trade nonprofit, and what we do is offer paid training and living wage employment to young people who basically don't have any prospects in life. And we pay double the minimum wage so that they're able to work, to live better now, but also to save money to invest in education. So a lot of them have finished high school or have done unpaid apprenticeships with the money they saved working for us, or even started little businesses. So that's where half my heart lives all the time. But like I said, I'm back on the road. I will be doing JTV's Jewel School in August, the 9th and 10th of August, so I'd love it if you tune in for that. I'll be at Beatapalooza in Birmingham, Alabama later in August. I'll be touring the Northeast throughout September, and I'll be going out west, probably late October, November, around in there, and doing the Southwest and Southwest coast. So I'm going all over the place, and October of 22, I'm going to be the guest teacher for a tour to Bali in Indonesia, which I'm just wildly excited about. So if you're interested in that, you can find that on my Facebook page if you scroll down. You can find out my whole travel schedule by going to either of my websites, and those are up on the board there. So feel free to go and look. I have a little bit of updating to do because I just nailed down a whole bunch of venues over the weekend. So you might want to wait a couple days to look at that, but it'll tell you everywhere I'm going to be and what I'll be teaching. So today's demo, you can see samples of a pretty wide variety of kinds of things you can get using the wire by the row technique. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, but I'm going to kind of show them to you one at a time and sort of point out where the rows are so that you sort of see where we're going. This is one of the easiest ones to see. And I started in the middle with this row of spirals right here. And then I worked out to the sides. So the next row is a row of seed beads. The next row is a row of wire loops, and then another row of seed beads. So here's the spiral that we started with on that. There we go. Takes a minute to focus. And we'll learn how to do that today. Here's the row of loops. Oops. And a friend of mine came up with a shortcut on this, so it's real quick and kind of fun to do. And then the row of seed beads. That's probably the most familiar of the things you'll be learning. So what you do is make a frame. It can be round like these. And here you can see I've got the row of loops attached to that inner frame, and then a row of spirals that graduate from small to large. I taught this at Virtually Ever Crafting in April, and that's another thing I'll be doing a little bit later this year in October is the Virtually Ever Crafting, which for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it is an online event that Q came up with and has managed to get running and has organized and so forth. Lots of good classes, online classes, and also there's one night where vendors sell their goods and jewelry and jewelry making materials. So it's a whole lot of fun. A lot of good teachers show up there. So you may want to look that up. It's Virtually Ever Crafting. And if you type that into the Facebook search, it'll come up and you'll get more information on that. So here is another colorful swoops, which I'll be teaching in October there. The other ones I taught last time. But you can see, here's the frame, a row of seed beads, a row of the loops, and then this is just a graduated series of seed bead loops that make sort of a fringe effect. This is just a real simple earring. It starts with just a row of the loops and then the seed beads attached to the outsides of the loops. You could build on that, and I'll show you how that's going to look. What we're going to do today is start with a row of the seed bead loops, and then we'll attach this, the row of wire loops. The spirals will be on this side. So if you stopped right here, you get this. And if you add the wire loops, you get that. Same exact thing, except it's got the wire loops to one side. And then if you go on to add more seed beads after that, you get what's on this side of this piece. And this is actually the same pattern as those, as the cuff bracelets that I showed you. Same exact thing. So it's just you make a row, you build another row on that, you build another row on that, and so forth. Sometimes you build directly onto the row, sometimes you make the rows separately and then attach them to each other. So we're going to learn all those things today. So we're going to start with a seed bead row. You take a piece of 28 gauge wire and just get it anchored to the frame. Since I'm right-handed, I like to work left to right. I'm just going to wrap around the frame a couple of times just to get it anchored there, and it sits right next to that frame loop. And then I'm going to add 4 seed beads. Oops. Oh, okay, we have a question. Yes, in fact, that's where I've been going lately. The little faceted rondelles are perfect for this. They're a little more delicate. Depending on the stone, they can be a little bit fragile, so you have to be a little bit more careful. But yeah, they're fabulous with the gemstones. I do the seed beads when I teach because it keeps the cost of the class down if people are buying kits, and I like people to be able to afford the classes, but I'm doing a lot more myself with the gemstones. So I've added my 4 seed beads. I'm going to pinch those seed beads with my left hand, just pinch them between my thumb and forefinger, bring the wire down around the frame, and pull until that first seed bead hits the frame, and then I wrap around an extra time. So I go under the frame once and then around again to make sure that that seed bead loop is really secure there. I'm going to do one more. And you'll just do this all the way across whatever frame you're using. And like I said, you can make a curved frame that's going to end up being an earring. You can make a V shape, like these little earrings here. These 2 pieces are just real fancy versions of what you can do with this technique. I just sort of brought them on to show you how crazy you can get. Okay, so I've got my next 4 seed beads on. I'm going to pinch them, pull until it hits the frame, and then wrap around twice. And you just do that all the way to the end. And you end up with this. And that looks kind of wonky, and that's okay, because the thing we're going to do next will sort of norm them, because we're always going to go between the 2nd and 3rd seed bead when we attach things to that. But before we do that, we're going to learn how to make the looped strip. And this is really kind of fun. You'll need some kind of dowel. I like to go with a 2mm or 2.5, 3 at the most. I'm going to do it a little bigger today. Excuse me, today, just to kind of so you can see a little more easily. So I'm going to pull off. The amount that you pull off has a lot of variables. I pulled off about 1 foot for what I'm going to do, but it depends on how big your dowel is, because it'll eat up more wire. It depends on how much you stretch the strip, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute. So I've got I'm leaving myself a little tail here to hold on to, and then I just wrap. And they're really close together, but don't worry too much about it, because every so often I just stop and shove everything together like that. But if they're a little bit apart, you don't have to worry about them getting on top of each other, which you definitely want to avoid. Shove them together again, and so on. I leave about 1 inch at the end, just for something to hold on to while we do the next step. So I've got this nice and tight around the dowel. I'm going to slide that off the dowel. And then I'm going to put this out straight like this so that I can keep my thumb on that while I'm doing the next thing. Now this little guy is a wallpaper seam roller, which I have found is my favorite way of rolling this row of loops flat. You can also use a round pill bottle that doesn't have a lip that would catch on things or erase part of it. It needs to be really flat. Anything round. I've had somebody actually use a roller pin once, which was a little cumbersome, but it worked in the long run. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to get it started by going a little bit on the near side, closest to my finger, until that starts to flatten out. And then once I get it sort of half flat, I just start really coming down on it hard. It gets flatter and flatter and a little bit longer as you go. But you want that nice and flat. So that's about right. You can see there's not a lot of width to it. And it doesn't look like loops yet because there's another step. What we're going to do is grab it at each end. Actually, I grab it maybe 1 inch apart or a little bit less than that, and just very slowly and carefully stretch it out. If it starts separating like it is here, just stop and grab it somewhere else. What you want to avoid is having space between them. But you just kind of keep pulling gradually all the way down. You'll probably have one at the end on each end that isn't very usable. You can see how I got a little bit of a gap there. I'm just going to take my awl and just push it over so that there's no gap. There's a little bit too close together there. And I just keep doing that until it looks pretty much consistent and the loops are about the same size as each other. And that's plenty close enough for what we're going to do. There ends up being a lot going on in all these pieces, so if things aren't perfectly identical, each loop, it's never going to show because it gets surrounded by all this other stuff. And you can see nobody's going to be looking at one individual loop in there to see whether they're all even. All right, so that's going to go on top of here. And when I refer to the bar side, that's the side where the loops are attached as opposed to the ones that are loose on the outside. And the reason for that is you might as well get in the habit of that, because if we were going around a circle to attach it to, that lets those flare out, whereas this side is always going to stay the length it is now, so it won't flare out and it'll end up buckling. All right, so to attach it to the top of this seed bead row, I'm going to take a new piece of 28 gauge. I think of 28 gauge as being my sewing wire. I use it for attaching things to each other. And we're going to kind of whip stitch it on there, but to get started, I'm going to put the tail through, and I'm going to leave a tail mostly for something to hold on to. We can cut that off later. But see how I'm pinching it against the frame loop. And then I'm going to anchor it just like we anchored it before around the frame, but this time we're anchoring it just around the wire that the beads are on. And I'm anchoring between the second and third bead. And as I pull it tight, I'm going to support that arch by pinching with my thumb and forefinger. See how I've got a grip on it there? And give it a good tug so it's nice and tight around there. And I'm going to do that a second time just to make sure we've got a really good anchor point. Now it's well anchored. So now I'm going to go through the second loop here because the first one's a little wonky, but I'm just going to leave the first one on for the moment. So anytime I'm going through the seed bead or the metal loops, I go away from me. The wire is coming away from me. And then I come back through the seed bead loop, coming towards me. Just make sure that doesn't twist because it'll kink. So that's got that first one attached, and then I'm going to attach it all the way across. The hitch is, the thing you have to pay attention to, is you only want to attach it to the top of a seed bead loop when your wire is right above, in the loop that's right above that loop, that arch. So I'm in the first one there. It looks like I'm going to have to go kind of work my way past 2 more loops before I'm going to be above that next seed bead arch. So to work my way over, I'm going to go away from me through that next loop. Oops. Magnifying lamps are really good for this. So I need to just keep working my way over, and I don't want to just abruptly go over to that seed bead arch because then you have this piece of wire going across that isn't very pretty. So what I'm going to do to work my way over there, as I went away from me through the thing, through this metal loop, and then I come back just under the bar, the wire that connects all those loops together, and then I'll go through the next one. Same thing. And come under the bar. And now this is the one that's going to be right above where I want to go through that seed bead arch. So I'm now in the 4th loop. We've got a roller rolling away over here. So now, this time instead of going under the bar, just the bar, I come through that seed bead arch, second seed bead arch. And I'll hold up here in just a second so you can see. So I've come back through that seed bead arch. Now before I tighten it there, I want to make sure that it's between the 2nd and 3rd beads, always between the 2nd and 3rd. And then I go through the next metal loop, and I'll work my way over to the next one. So I'll swing under the bar. I'll go through the next loop. And it looks like I need to go one more before I'll be positioned right above that next seed bead arch where I want to come back through. So I'll go through one more loop. And that's the loop that's right above the seed bead arch. So I've successfully worked my way over there, and now I come back through the seed bead arch. Make sure I'm tightening between the second and third beads. And whoops, I slid over, so I want to back up and make sure I'm in that right spot there. It's real easy to go between the wrong two beads, and then you get a real wonky look that isn't very attractive. But you can see how that's sort of straightening all those seed bead arches so that they look a little bit more regulated. And you just do that all the way to the end. And we're gonna, oh good. Andy's telling me that my hand placement is good. So, all right, so I'm just gonna clip this since we're not gonna go all the way across. And we're going to learn how to make the spirals. This is the trickiest part. It's the part people have the most trouble with. That said, I've had people jump in as absolute beginners and take to it fine. Some people find it a little more challenging. But if you just hold, it's one of the few things I insist on you using the hand position that I use, at least while you're learning it, because it keeps you oriented. It keeps you from spiraling in the wrong direction and getting a real wonky looking strip. So we're going to, just like for the small loops, we're going to use 24 gauge. That's my go-to gauge for those two rows. I'm going to cut a little bit more because the spirals eat up the wire a little bit more than the loops do. And then we're going to start with the round nose pliers. Make the first spiral. I'm going to grab it as close to the end of the wire as I can get. I can't even feel it when I do this because I'm so near the end. And then I'm just going to roll a P-shaped loop. So notice I'm just holding the wire straight with my thumb and just roll until I've got a P shape. A little tiny one. Work right at the tip of your pliers for this because that's the inside of the first spiral. And then I'm just going to keep rolling, but I'm not going around the pliers anymore. I'm going around the outside of that first spiral, like that. When you get this far, you can actually do it with your hand and just kind of nudge it over, or you can take your chain nose pliers and use that to nudge around until you've gone 2 complete circles. And you can tell because the beginning tail of your spiral is going to be more or less pointing down towards your long wire. That means you've gone 2 times around. So there's our first spiral. And then from here on, if you're right-handed, if you're left-handed, you'll convert it. I'm sure you're used to having to do that. If you hold it with the spiral pointing down towards the table and the wire out to your right, then you can grab it just a little bit to the right of where your first spiral is. Let me wait until that focuses a little bit. So see how I'm just a little bit to the right of it. And I'm not coming up the same way the spiral is. I have with the spiral down and my pliers are parallel to the table. And that's important because otherwise your spiral will be going the wrong way. If I do everything in this position, I always know that the next move is to come down, under, and up. So I go down and then under the pliers and up against the side of the pliers, and you end up with this. And from there, it's actually easiest to do it with your hands. So what I do is I point my thumbnail down on that new loop to hold it in place. And this is the hardest thing to get people to do because it's counterintuitive, but you want to hold the wire way out here. You don't want to hold it up here because you'll get little bumps and bends. But if you hold it here, because it's dead soft wire, see how it just curves itself around nicely? So you're not pulling it, you're just guiding it. When you get to about there, just spin the whole strip a little bit, or what's going to be a strip. Come around a little farther, spin the whole thing again. So I'm spinning it to my left, and I'm just guiding the wire around, but it's sort of curving itself until I get to here, or maybe a little bit farther. So what we're going to be going for is a straight line across with all the spirals underneath that straight line. If there's any space between them, you can just roll them towards each other a little bit, because you do want them to overlap just slightly. The one thing that'll really look bad, that'll really show up and will, you can have a lot of wonkiness, but the one thing that'll really show and not look great is if you have space between some of the spirals and not between others, so it looks irregular and gappy. Is gappy a word? All right, It is now, I just made one. So I'm going to hold that same position with the spirals down towards the table. I can hold on to these while I grasp the wire between, and again, near the tip of your pliers, because you want that inside circle to be tiny. And since I'm in the right position, I know I can just reach over here, down, under the pliers and up, and stop there. So now I have this. Plunk my thumbnail down on that new little loop, grab it about 1.5 inches out, and just guide it around. And once you get the basics on this, you get into a rhythm where it starts going pretty fast, or faster. And it's a little bit up high, so I'm just going to force it down like that so I've got a nice straight line going here. I'll do one more because I know this is a little bit tricky. So pointing down towards the table, grasp it near the tip of my pliers, down, under, and up. Put my thumbnail down to sort of hold that, keep that little loop from getting small. I don't want to steal wire from it. And then grab it way out and keep spinning the strip around as I guide the wire around. And there's my fourth one. And you just keep doing that until you have the length you want. I just happen to have one here that we can use that's a little bit longer. And it's going to go here. So if you look at the model here, actually this is easier to see. I usually start with the spiral in the middle, but you can do it either way. We're going to attach those spirals to that frame, and then we'll have this whole section. We'll have a spiral, seed beads, and the wire loops. So to do that, I'm going to get another piece of the 28 gauge, or sewing wire. I'm going to anchor it to the frame just because it's easier to anchor to the frame because it's not as fragile. So I'm going to anchor it pretty much right where I anchored the, for the wire loops, or for the seed bead loops. You can actually wind it around right on top of those first ones, the first coils that are already there. So that's anchored. That's the new wire. And then it doesn't matter which side of this I go into because ultimately I'm going to have to go into both sides. But I'm going to start with the side that's connecting them just because I'm used to that. Oops. And actually, if you start with that side, you can pop it down between the spirals. You don't have to feed it through on a good day. So I've got it through just the outer wire of that spiral. You don't want to go into the inner wire because if you do, when you go to pull it tight, it's going to collapse the spiral. So I'm just through the bottom of it, and then I come back around the frame. Make sure that loop that I'm pulling doesn't twist. Oh, hi! How you doing? I have an old friend who's tuning in. So there I've got it basically attached. You'll probably go around more than once for each spiral, just whatever you feel makes it really secure. So I'm going to go around a second time. I'm going to pop between those two spirals and then maybe come over here for the next attachment, and basically just whip stitch it to the frame. So on the other side you'll have to actually feed the wire through, but on this side you can just pop it between and it goes a lot faster because of that. We'll go on to the next one. Sometimes you may only need to do one. It doesn't matter, just as long as you're getting a nice secure attachment to what you're to that frame you're attaching it to. So you just keep doing that until you have this. And So basically what we have here is this section, those first 3 rows basically, a spiral row, a seed bead row, and that row. If you kept going, you could do this as long as you want. You can make it a whole bracelet if you want to. One of the things I've been doing lately is curl it into a hoop. This one this is going to end up being a hoop at some point. But it would just be a much wider hoop, and it can look really cool. You hang it from a few pieces of chain and put an ear wire on it, and they really swing nicely and get a lot of attention. You could also, like I said, start with a circular shape and attach things to I could have started with a seed bead row here instead. You could just mix and match, but you could just keep going until you're happy with it. For example, if I wanted to, I could put another spiral row here, and then another row of seed beads, and then another looped row until it was this wide if I want to, or halfway up my arm. So it's pretty versatile. It's a way of getting a semi-solid look with wire. I'm a person who doesn't like to solder. I'm afraid of the heat, and I have a carpet in my workroom anyway, so it's just not a good idea. But this has allowed me to sort of make facsimiles or interpretations of things that are done in other media. So I've had a whole lot of fun playing with it. I'll show you a couple of other things that'll let you know how fancy you can get. This piece is one of the fanciest things I've ever made, but other than the bezel, it's just row upon row. The reason it looks more dense is because I made everything smaller. So I used a smaller dowel. I used size 15 seed beads instead of 11s. But it's hard to see, but you've got a row of little silver size 15 seed beads, and then a row of loops. I think I did another row of loops, and so on. And then when I got down to here, I just started making partial rows instead of going all the way around like I did up here. And just kept decreasing the size of the rows so that I could get that pointed shape. So you can just play with it and get all kinds of shapes and different ways of approaching it. I decided to put another stone in there. I felt like it needed something solid in there, and then I just worked around that. And then this one has a complication to make it even more solid and more textured. I took little rows of seed beads, 5 or 6 seed beads at a time, and attached them vertically like this, just to give it a little bit more variety so it doesn't look quite so row by row. So there are all kinds of variations that you can do to, sort of get a variety. This piece I entered in the Bead and Buttons last Bead Dreams show, and it took the grand award in the wire category. So I was really excited about that. It was very cool. Thank you, Andy. He's saying congratulations. All right. And then this is another piece, and part of the fun of this is being able to do kind of stiff, solid shapes that are kind of like walls of wire and beads. This is a prayer box. It actually has a lid that opens, and it's pretty firm, and just like I did with the more complicated piece, I made a little bezel and then worked out row by row to the sides and row by row down here. Same thing on these sides. I've got a row of seed beads there, a row of spirals there, another row of seed beads, there's a row of loops, and you just keep alternating or combining them in whatever combination you want. So the back is spirals, seed beads, loops, spirals, seed beads, loops, and so on. And then make a hinge lid and you're all set to go. So I'm going to go back to the spirals and just give you a little bit more on that, because I know that that's the thing that most people have trouble with. If I can find my little demo piece. Actually, I'll start again because it's good to see it from the beginning. I'll just start on the other end of this one. So you start right at the end of your pliers, make a tiny little P-loop. And then what I do is I just grab it at the top of the P and bring it around wide so it's circling around your inner loop. When you get to here, you can either do it with your fingers or with your chain nose pliers. I like to use the tools I was born with. There's your first loop, or spiral. Hold it with the wire going to your right and a spiral down towards the table. Grab it right across that wire, and then just with your left hand reach over and come down, under, and up. And then this is the key thing. I have trouble, even with all the experience I've had with this, if I grab it right here, I get little bends in it. But if I grab it out here and just draw it around, make sure you're not pulling, just kind of guide it, and just spin the strip, and then roll them together if they need it, and so on. I'll do one more. And you really do get into a rhythm after a while where you're cooking right along. This also is real pretty if you have a stone that you want to bezel that is thick. You can make spirals to go around the outside of the stone. I don't have one handy here, but that's another thing you could do with the spirals. I use them in all kinds of things. I do a couple of different chandelier earring patterns that use the spirals. It just gives a real nice, light, lacy look to the piece that you're doing. It can add a lot of interest to a piece that's otherwise a little bit more less varied. Okay. Seems like there was something else I didn't show you. So the piece that we've been working on, I was going to make it into an earring eventually. You can see I've still got to put the seed beads on the other side. But then what you can do, it's a lot easier to work on if you make it flat. And then what you can do is use some kind of dowel. This is a ring mandrel. And just wrap it around to get the round shape. And I'm going to close that up just a little bit more. And again, I just do a lot with my fingers. My rule is it doesn't have to be right as long as it looks right. So as long as it looks circular, it's good. And then what I would do, since I've got the loops at both ends of both pieces of frame, I would make some kind of hanger for it. This is one possibility where you make a little V shape and then stick those through. Let's see, I think it goes this way. On both sides. So you've got a little V coming from through two loops, and then you do another V on the other side, and you end up with this. Let's see if I can get that to focus a little better. Put my hand behind it. Let's try that. And then I just put a jump ring at the top of the two V's, and that's what the ear wire hangs from. You can also do that with chain. Instead of putting the little V shapes, just take short pieces of chain that are exactly the same length, and put one end of the chain into the frame loops down here, and capture the four tops with the jump ring, and then hang it from your ear wire. So I think my favorite shapes are the V shape. When I'm doing earrings, I really like the V-shaped ones. And that's super easy. I'm going to show you how to get a nice sharp bend in your wire, in your frame. And I'll show you what happens if you, at least to me, if I do it any other way. I take my chain nose pliers. If I just bend with my chain nose pliers, I get this, instead of getting a nice sharp point. However, what I do is I grab it wherever I want, so that this edge of my pliers is wherever I want my bend to be. And then I press up, instead of moving the pliers, I press up against the side of the pliers with my thumb, and I get a much sharper point. And then if you get a bump in it that you don't like, just take your chain nose up at the fat end and just press it down. If you can get a grip, hang on. So I'm covering the bump, and then I'm just going to press, and it flattens it out pretty well. But there's my V shape. I can make it as big or as small as I want. I can make the loops at the top to hang it from, and you get something more along these lines. So it's a great technique to design with. I hope that some of you will try it out and send me pictures, or tag me on Facebook if you post them to Facebook, because I'd love to see what you come up with. I have a couple of booklets that have actual patterns that utilize the technique. Let's see if I can get a good take on these. And these are available for me personally. This one is actually called Wire by the Row. This is when I was really exploring this technique. There's the cuffs that you've already seen. This is pretty close to what we were just doing with the earring, curling it around the dowel. This has just a slight curve to make a chandelier base. This is this one. Same thing. All of these are in there. Here's another one we didn't do today, but it's basically the same thing, row upon row upon row. Some variations. The pattern that we just did, that's just like the cuff, if you start with a much bigger curve, you get this piece. It's the same basic idea, building row on row. You can do a real tight kind of thing. This has, I think, 9 rows, but I did everything really small. So it comes out to be real dense and less lacy than some of the others. So if you want a lacier piece, you use larger dowels, make your spirals a little bit more open. If you want a more tight, dense look like that. Let's see if I can come up a little bit. Okay, we have another question. How would I finish the ends of the cuff? Okay, the cuff, I actually use memory wire instead of 18 gauge wire, which is what we were doing with the pieces we made today. So I use, this one actually has 4 pieces of memory wire in it, one on either side of the strip and one right before the last row of seed beads. And you can actually just lay it on there and do the seed beads over it to attach it in there, but that really makes this nice and stiff. And then all it is loops at the end of the memory wire. And I hid the loops behind things. Let's see. The loops look a lot like this, only maybe a little bit smaller, but I did them sideways, so they lay flat. That way, when you wear it, you don't have loops going down that are going to cut into your, make little dents in your skin from having the pressure there. This is obviously too small for me, but you get the idea. So basically, you just make loops at the ends of the frame wires, the memory wire. And then basically what I did was I kept my little loops and spirals and so forth going until it covered up those frame loops. And then you just clip it off. Whatever you're attaching the loops together with, you just go around a couple times to anchor it at the end so that nothing can unravel itself. But basically I just went until my frame loops were hidden because I didn't think they looked as nice. Let's see what I did on the other one. This one I left the frame loops going under. Can you see that? And that's another option. I think on this one I didn't like, the ends didn't look finished enough to me because those loops stuck out from everything else. So what I did was just put seed beads going across from loop to loop to loop, just to get that row of dark blue seed beads there to make it look a little more finished. So the answer to the question of how do you finish a cuff is sort of however you can, or however it looks good. Once you've learned all this stuff, figuring that out is pretty easy. But like I said, you can either just bring your loops up so that they cover the frame loops. You can do something across to make it more even there. Whatever is looking good to you at the time. That's not very specific, but that's kind of how I design. So did that answer the question? All right. Any other questions? Oh, I was going to show you the other booklet that also has some of the wire by the row. It's not all wire by the row. But this bezel, it starts with a simple bezel and then works out to the sides, and you can see the row of loops there. These you actually saw in person, but these are some of the simpler little dangle earrings that we have. There's the colorful swoops that I showed you. And then it has several other patterns as well. This was the first booklet I did. There's some variations on the back. Pretty much the same pieces, just in different colors. And then I also have one that's a deco style wire that I don't have handy, but I'm working on a 4th booklet that I hope to have done by maybe November. that's going to have a lot of floral, sort of a floral theme. Lots of interesting flowery type jewelry that will be coming up. So if you're interested in any of the booklets, you can contact me on Facebook or through the website, either of my websites, and I can sell those directly to you. But it does give you some patterns to follow that'll give you more specifics until you feel comfortable designing on your own with this technique. Any other questions? Yes, the websites, basically melodymacduffee.com, and then the soulsamanya.net is the nonprofit website. And you can reach me from either of those, and then I'm on Facebook just under my name. I'm also on Instagram under my name. So you can find me there. You can Google me and find all kinds of other ways to get in touch. But I wanted to let you know that Q will be back on Wednesday. She is going to do a studio tour from Peninsula School of Art in Fish Creek, Wisconsin on Wednesday. Friday, she's not going to have anything, so I think there was supposed to be a wine day or something, it's going to be a free day. And I just want to thank you all for coming. I hope that it would be really great if you could like and share the post to get the word out about Q Talk Live. And I hope you all have a wonderful week.